This video is really an elevator pitch for a proposal to create a certificate in civil engineering with micro-credentials. Um, it's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I know that it's a really good opportunity for us to improve what we do in civil engineering. So I'm really focusing on civil engineering. Um, what I suggest there is a need for is a certificate which allows students to become work ready after the first year, and I think this is entirely possible. It is something we used to do in the NZCE. In the NZCE, we would do maybe a year's full time and then we'd go straight into work. And I think it's the NZDE as it stands at present doesn't really allow that, and I think that we can do better. We can allow students to those students that are able to become work ready within a year and then finish off the NZDE part time. And so the way I see it working is that would be a level 5 certificate. It would be the first half of the NZDE, and then the second half of the NZDE would be um, done to complete the NZDE qualification. And then on top of that, there could be the BEng Tech. So notice that I think that the NZDE should be the first 2 years of the BEng Tech, but that's another story. And then there would have to be bridging courses to do the BE. So at present, the NZDE in the back of its mind has the idea that students are going to go to university, and I think that we need to remove that and just focus on students going into the workforce and doing that 90% of the work that is routine work, rather than thinking about how are we going to get them going further into university. We need to provide the opportunity for them to do that with bridging courses, but it shouldn't be embedded in the system because I think we're paying too big a price for that. I think it should be mainly delivered using micro-credentials because I think that'll give us extra flexibility and be able to cover a broader range of people. It'll also allow us to package up things for schools and stuff, so I'll talk about that more later on. I think it's also manageable size courses and it's regular achievement. So if you're trying to get someone into engineering and they're not really all that advanced academically, then a whole lot of smaller chunks might help them move their way through it. And a flexible sequence to match the student requirements or the student interests, but also their interests and requirements if they're working in industry, so that they can do the courses that are relevant to what they're doing. So a lot of the certificate would be to try to focus on what people need, just-in-time delivery of information. So the format I'd suggest is that each micro-credential is 3 NZDE credits. So there'd be 5 credentials per NZDE course. Each of the courses is worth 15 credits. It would be 30 hours per credential, which is a fifth of what an NZDE course time requirement is. And if they hurried, they could do it in 3 weeks, but realistically most people doing it part-time would probably take 5-6 weeks to do each credential. I'll talk about the structure in a minute, but I think that it needs to be that the students can start the course when they wish. They can work at their own pace. There's no timetable, there's no set exams, and that the content is free and online, that there'll be this massive great database of credential videos that anyone can access. So it'd be a lot like an open MOOC in a way, that the information is there. There are curated videos and readings. There are connections to online websites, and there are activities using those resources. In particular, using those online resources like the NZTA online courses, the WorkSafe safety information. If we could, it would be great if we could connect into New Zealand standards, but that would require some sort of copyright agreement with them. But anything we can do to connect them into those online resources that they need when they are working as an engineer would be really quite useful and would make the course just that little bit more authentic. Online forums for questions. Because it is not a set class thing, there's going to have to be a tutor answering questions as they come up, but the idea of this is that we minimize the amount of tutor work involved to try to keep the costs down, but still provide the support that the student requires. There will need to be some courses that are run in labs, so I'd suggest that there be full day lab sessions. So for example, with surveying, there is maybe a couple of days involved in on-site surveying. So they'd come to Unitech or another Polytech, and they'd do the a one-day session or something like that, or a two-day session, um, to so that they are still sort of getting that lab time and that hands-on time with actual equipment. The assessment, I suggest that it be payment for an assessment, per assessment. Same sort of model that they're using for MOOCs, that you do the course, and if you're quite happy with the course and you're comfortable with it, then you do the project, and then you might pay money for the assessment of the project, and that is where the money comes in. What that does is it encourages a lot of people to do the courses, but as they've found in MOOCs, maybe you'll only get 10% passing. But if you've got 1,000 people doing that, that's 100 people coming in doing the course who wouldn't have done it otherwise. And I think that philosophy of sort of accepting that the total number that you're actually opening this up to is the way of doing it. Obviously, assessing it by a normal coursework educational outcome, like passing, number of students passing, that's not really the way to go. I think that if we are going to open it up to a whole lot of people, we need people to just come in and have a look and see if it's for them, and if it's not, then they don't do the whole course, but at least they've learned something, and it will raise the profile of engineering. There would be, as you can see here, I've just suggested one course that it's made into 3 parts, 1 part per every 2 or 3 weeks. At the end of each part there'd be a quiz, an online quiz, Moodle quiz, automatically marked. It would be more of a formative assessment. It would allow the student to pass by, to do the quiz by answering a question. If they get it wrong, it'll give them some feedback, and then they have another try at it, and then they keep on going. So they'd be more like formative assessments rather than any type of test, and it's just to get them reviewing, reflecting on the topic before they move on to the next one. Underlying the whole thing would also be a project, and that would sort of last the whole course, and then there'd maybe be a week or 2 or however long they want to produce that project, and then they could make a decision. Yes, I think this project, I'm going to pay the money, the $100 or something like that, and that's when it would go to a tutor to assess it, to provide feedback. It might be that they provide some feedback and then the student goes away, tidies it up, and then resubmits. So it all depends on how much work we want the tutor to do. And then to make sure that the student has actually done their own work and that they know what they're talking about, the final part of the assessment would be an interview with the marker. So that would be face-to-face. They might come into a tech, or they might do it by Skype. But whatever happens, we need to make sure that each one of these credentials is verified as being the work of the student. And that interview can be 5-10 minutes, just a quick, this is what you did in your project, why did you do this, why did you do that, and it allows the marker to very quickly understand, yes, this is their own work, give them a bit of feedback about how they went, and also assess whether the work is all of their work, and if it is, then they will give them the mark that they got for the project. So a student could do a really bit, submit an average side of type of report, but if they're able to answer the questions of the interviewer and show that they know what they've put in their own report, then the interviewer will just say, yes, this is your own work, I'm going to give you 100% of that mark. However, if you're interviewing them and it turns out that they don't know most of what they're doing, then the interviewer is going to say, well, you only know half of what you put in your own report, I'm going to give you 50% of it. And so the project mark would be multiplied by the interview mark, and that would give you your final mark. So students could do an average job as long as they know what they've done, as long as it's their own work, then they are going to get an average mark. If they do a really good job or they get someone else to do it, they're not going to be able to pass the interview, and so they're going to fail the course. So this is providing some sort of confidence that the micro-credentials are actually a representative of that actual student's abilities in that particular subject. So how are we going to do this? This is the existing NZDE course, and unfortunately it doesn't really lend itself to a certificate or getting students to be work ready after the first year. And the problem with it is that it is a is based on a university course structure. What they've done is they've taken the classic university structure where the first year is spent with students learning engineering science and maths and general subjects about engineering, and then gradually getting more and more detailed, focusing more and more on one field of engineering. And that works really well for universities, but it does not work for us. And NZDE needs to be work focused on a specific industry right from the start, and that is not recognised in this curriculum, and so therefore it's not very well aligned to industry requirements. It needs to be restructured, to allow our students to be better than what they are already, but also to allow us to produce work-ready students after 1 year. And if it is restructured, then I think that that first year could produce students that have a set of skills that are useful to industry. And so I've got two versions of it. The first one I'm going to show you is minimal change. So it's taking the existing courses and changing them as much as we can. So there's the engineering fundamentals. Now the engineering fundamentals in the existing course has electrical fundamentals, it has mechanical fundamentals and civil engineering fundamentals, and it's so stacked with content that the students just get horribly confused. And so they cover a whole broad range of subjects in a very shallow way. So what I'm saying is engineering fundamentals should be covering one subject, civil engineering, in detail. So remove some content and provide more depth to that content. Technical literacy, leave it as it is. It seems to be working okay, although as I suggest later it can be better. The materials, what I'm suggesting there is once again it needs to be changed to remove the electrical and mechanical components and just focus on civil engineering materials. It's also a lab class. They do lab testing and stuff like that, so they need to include that as part of it. So there might be some modules where the students need to come in for a day to do all of the lab testing required for the materials, or it might be 2 days. I'll talk about civil engineering practice in a minute. So there's land surveying and geotechnical engineering. They're both existing subjects, but they are lab classes, so there would need to be modules where the student comes in and does time at a tech to do the lab part of those. Civil and structural drawing, construction practices and structures are all existing subjects. Well, construction practices isn't, but it should be. Construction practices covers the skills they need to be a site engineer, and at present there's nothing in the NZDE that covers that. Half of our students go into the construction industry, and there is nothing in the NZDE that tells them how to be site engineers, which I think is something that needs to be corrected. Now I'm suggesting that there be two new courses, Civil Engineering Practice and Infrastructure Design, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Civil Engineering Practice would be all about introducing the students to the subject. At present, they don't really have any clues about what civil engineering is, how it all hangs together, and I teach second year NZDE students, and a lot of the things about civil engineering are a bit of a surprise to them. They don't know that there are construction companies and consultancies, and they do different things, but they can do both. They don't understand that until they get into the latter parts of it. They don't understand how a lot of projects work, so it's very hard in these courses here to provide authentic problems because they don't really have enough knowledge to put together even the simplest engineering project. So civil engineering practice would sort of address that. Infrastructure design is I teach on the engineering project, and we find that those students can't do basic civil engineering skills like designing a pipe, and that is because the courses that are supposed to teach them that are too academically weighted, and I'll talk about that more later on. Now with this focus here, with these courses here, so there's 4 subjects there and there's 6 here, pick 4 of them. A student can come out being a survey assistant or a surveyor, a site engineer for the construction industry, and half of our students go into that role. A lab technician doing geocheck or materials checking. A draftsperson doing infrastructure, doing the basic drawings on AutoCAD, or an infrastructure designer, sort of being able to do routine subdivision design. And so those are 5 of the most popular roles that our students fill, and they could fill them in within a year. Obviously at the entry level, but they could still do those jobs if they were taught the right skills in that first year. So the new courses, the civil engineering practice, big picture view of civil engineering. It would take some of the engineering management, because the engineering management course is sort of overloaded, and it would also add some soft skills in there. So the project parties and structure, project lifecycle, professional practice, those are all from engineering practice. Engineering management, which is usually taught at the end, but to my view, you should be teaching them ethics, sustainability, consultation right at the start, so that they are applying that in the following courses. But we teach them right at the end when it's not something they practice. So I think that needs to be right at the front. They need to be developing the soft skills, and in this case, it would have to be productivity soft skills, being able to manage their own time, critical thinking, problem solving, what the design process is, going through a proper design process before they start learning design. And obviously construction processes and tools, the basic engineering projects that we do, so that the later courses can actually have authentic assessments. The other one I'd like to add in is the infrastructure design, and this would be entry-level design, and this is put in for two reasons. First of all, it allows students to do a design project very, very early in their first year, and they don't get to do that at present. To go through the design process that they've learned in this engineering practice. And the basic engineering infrastructure design process is taken from council guidelines and books, and it's by the book, and it's just understanding some basic concepts and applying them to the particular situation you've got. It is really quite simple. We teach our surveyors this in their first year, and they turn out to be better infrastructure designers, or know more about infrastructure design, than our engineers. So it's an established course. It is a really good course, and it means that they'd also get to do design really quite early. So I think that one should be added in as well. Obviously, and one of the problems with the NZDE is every time they put something in, they don't take anything out. So it's stacked with content, a lot of it which isn't actually, parts of it which aren't all that useful. Okay, it's just someone's view. And so instead of having the discussion, they actually just bung it in. They don't take anything out, and so the NZDE is very, very content heavy, and a lot of it can be removed. So the ones that I think should be changed, so they shouldn't be removed, they should be changed from compulsory courses to electives, and that is the hydraulics and highway engineering. They're both very specialised courses. They're both very theoretical and academic, and they don't really teach the students the routine engineering practice. That is why I want to put in the infrastructure design course. That will provide them with the basic skills in being able to design roads and being able to design water systems, which is what these courses probably should do, but they don't. These courses provide the theory behind it. So if someone wants to be an infrastructure or water designer, they should do the hydraulics course. That is there as an elective. If they want to be a roading engineer, they should do this one, but the basic skills they need to function in the industry would be taught in that infrastructure design course. And the infrastructure design course also combines them both. Sort of teaching them separately is giving you that false idea about the way infrastructure design works. The road is influenced by the water systems and vice versa, and that needs to be reflected in the design process, and that's why I think it should be combined into one. So here's what's proposed, is that these first parts here would be the level 5 certificate, with the construction practices, these ones being interchangeable. So these are the 6 subjects that you pick 4 of them. These are the ones I think have to happen. And engineering management would change a little bit, because some of the content from there has gone to this. And then we leave these open. So these green things are pretty well what's there now. And it meets all the requirements of a certificate and of a diploma. Now the other option that I want to look at is embedding maths and science. At present, the maths and science are separate. So engineering fundamentals, the mathematics, materials, they are all separate subjects, and they are engineering science rather than engineering practice. My view is that you need to embed them into the courses. You need to take those out, and the courses that use maths should be teaching the maths as part of that course, because at present the students don't make that link between the maths and the application of that maths. It is assumed that, oh, they've done the maths course, therefore they can do the maths, and the fact of the matter is that many can't. So, for example, the land surveying, the first micro-credential in the land surveying would be the basic science behind land surveying, including the mathematics. And then each of those, the other 4 modules, would start with the mathematics behind it, just reviewing it all, and all that sort of thing. Same with geotech engineering, reviewing the science and the maths behind it as part of the whole course. Materials and structures, it's silly to have them separated out. You need to have them as one course. By doing that, you've also freed up some time, and engineering literacy needs to be split. At present, it's communications and engineering drawing. My view is that the drawing needs to be separated out and be a separate class, because being able to use AutoCAD, being able to use computer-based systems is one of the things that our students can do that university students can't. It's their slot, it's their niche. They need to be doing more computer-based learning. Okay, so therefore we need to start there, getting them established. That would be the old tech drawing type courses. It would mean that civil and structural drawing could be more substantial, and it would mean also that I think that we need to add some more drawing courses in the latter part of the NZDE, so that someone can do maybe 4 courses in drawing, because that is one of the things that our students do. They are draftspeople. But more than that, nowadays with computers, it's more than just drawing pictures. It's using the models and using 12D and using Rivet, which do a lot of work, and they're actually doing the calculations as well now. So it may be in the future that the students are actually doing the drawings, producing the drawings, the computer's doing the calculations, and then someone's checking the calculations, rather than the calculations being done before the drawings. And that's the way technology is going to work. So it goes on from there. So that is embedding this maths and science. Now that might be, we go straight into that. I can say now that there will be a lot of problems with that, with people who aren't used to this way of doing things, but I think it is the most useful way of doing stuff. Or it could be something we move into from option 1. Just to give you an example of how I think that it would work, these are 2 courses I do, and this is me splitting them into the 5 micro-credentials. So the first one would be CP1, which would be an overview, sort of the big picture of construction practices. Likewise with the EM1, the first course is an overview, and then you can do the other 4 in whatever order you like. And I think that it's also quite useful for schools, that schools could actually take that, CP1, EM1, they could, and maybe the first course of 3 or 4 others, and they could put together a pretty good general engineering type a course using those micro-credentials, those big overview ones. And if the students are interested, they can go and explore each of these other micro-credentials as they go. So the opportunities, I think with domestic students, they can try before they buy. They can sort of do some courses and see how they go. They might not submit projects for them, they might not get the micro-credential, but they can look at it. It'll raise the profile, it'll get them thinking about it, it'll get them thinking, yes, I can do it. Secondary schools can combine the credentials to provide civil engineering courses or parts of courses, and I'm thinking of maybe drawing courses, maybe surveying courses, all those sort of things. So there are lots of opportunities for micro-credentials to be integrated into what they do already, or have civil engineering programs, courses as part of the NCEA. Engineering companies could hire students straight from school and then use the micro-credentials to train them according to the needs. Existing workers, so I'm talking about people sort of digging the ditches or operating diggers and stuff like that, they could upskill with part-time study. So by my estimate, if you're taking 4-5 weeks to do each micro-credential, you could nickel and dime a certificate in about 3 years, possibly 4. There'd be no rush on it. You just do the work when you can. We'd have to make it interesting to engage them, but it would mean that they can upskill themselves if they want to, with a bit of help. And international students, we find a lot of our students turn here and they turn up in New Zealand and they are totally lost. They don't know the language, they don't know the the words that we're using and things like that. And so this would allow international students to try some micro-credentials before they commit. It might also increase the number of students that are turning up to our techs, because they'll have done a few courses, they'll have invested in it already. But it also means that they'll also know what they're in for, and I feel that a lot of our students don't understand what they're in for, and they have a really hard time with it. So letting them try before they buy as well. So here's, just to finish, here's an example of the way I think a micro-credential might work. So I've taken the courses that I do, and I've thought about a person working on a building site, maybe a labourer or something, that young guy sort of left school early, and he wants to up the skill. So he'd sort of do these, the civil engineering practice 1, 2 and 3, and this would be stuff that he'd know if he's working on the site. It might be that some of these red ones here, he might be able to show experience in it already, or knowledge in it already. Basically, he could do the interview straight up and get them credited. Then he might decide to do the construction practices, maybe engineering management. So you can see that there's a mix and match there. There are opportunities for him to provide a cross credit if he wants to. There might be surveying courses mixed in here as well, so he might sort of have the opportunity to do surveying on site, and so he might want to do that as well. So you can see that the mixing and matching it all means that we can sort of use the micro-credentials to cater for the person's need and for their interest and get them through. So I think the micro-credentials are a great way to go. I think the NZDE or a certificate in the NZDE is the way to go. Now, you won't be able to do the whole NZDE using micro-credentials. There's things like the project and some of the bigger, the more specialised courses that need to be done as one course. But the first part of it could be done using micro-credentials, and it could be those micro-credentials could be structured in such a way that they're going to attract a wider range of people, and it's going to help a wider range of people to get their foot in the door to get going with civil engineering.